Welcome back to the Tech Talks Daily podcast, where we bring you inspiring conversations with tech leaders, entrepreneurs, investors, and industry experts. And in today's episode, we're joined by Jordan Gowell, co-founder and CEO of Rally, which is a revolutionary checkout platform for small businesses. And Jordan is also a venture capitalist and entrepreneur who has had a successful career in the commerce space. Prior to founding Rally, Jordan co-founded CartHook, a payment brand that processed over $3 billion on behalf of merchants. But fast forward to present day, Jordan's going to share his origin story and his passion for all things commerce as we explore the tech trends in the industry and his insights on how to grow a business and a startup in this area, as well as the motivation behind starting Rally. So buckle up and hold on tight, because no matter where you're listening in the world, I'm going to beam your ears to the Chicago area of the United States, where Jordan is going to share his perspective on the importance of empowering small business owners to operate on their own terms, as well as tech trends in commerce that will excite him in 2023. So grab your headphones and join us now. So a massive warm welcome to the show, Jordan. Can you tell the listeners a little about who you are and what you do?
Absolutely. Neil, thanks so much for having me on. So I'm Jordan. I am the CEO and co-founder at a company called Rally, where we offer e-commerce merchants a checkout solution. And I'm sure we can get into all the details and the history behind it. But it's great to be here on a Friday morning. I'm excited for the week to be over. It was an intense one. And that's it. How about you? How are things on your end?
Pretty good, thank you. I'll just say before we started recording, I've just got back from Chicago. When you said things were a bit intense, that storm was pretty intense a couple of days ago, wasn't it?
Yes, absolutely. My kids are not used to that thunder. We just moved here a few months ago, and it shook the entire house. So it's funny that you were here in town at the same time. Hope you had a good time. Yeah,
man, can't beat it. Yeah, I was at rooftop bar in Cindy's, and I also I had my first ever. I can't think of the name of the burger place now, but it was mac and cheese on a burger. I've never had anything like it. Sounds awful, but it was delicious.
Great. Good. So it's good to be with you today.
Yeah, you too, man. So tell me about your background and why you're so passionate about the commerce space, and ultimately, what's your origin story?
Yeah, I think what I'm most passionate about is entrepreneurship, and that's deeply ingrained in my experience. My parents brought us over from Israel when I was 6. And so I grew up in a pretty typical immigrant entrepreneur household, where my dad was an entrepreneur and I kind of understood business and finances of the family really early on. And when you grow up in that environment, that's the path that you're very likely to take. And that's what I did. I've done a bunch of different businesses and got into e-commerce and the web about 10 years ago.
Fantastic. And of course, that path would lead you to Rally. So I've got to ask, what made you start Rally? Can you tell me more about the story behind the company and those problems that you set out to solve with tech from the outset?
Sure. And it's funny, many of the problems we try to solve now are the same problems I had 10 years ago when I got into e-commerce as a merchant. So my brothers and I actually started an e-commerce business that had a network of niche sites. That was back when Google AdWords worked, and it was very effective to send keyword traffic directly to a very niche site that matched that keyword search. So, it became relatively easy to start a bunch of different sites at the same time using the same tech. So that's how I got into e-commerce as a merchant. And I ran that it was about a year and a half. So it was pretty short. And then we sold it. And then I got into software for e-commerce merchants. And so in many ways, over the last 8 years in my software startups, I've really been addressing the same needs that I had as a merchant. It's almost baffling, interesting, confusing, whatever else, that a lot of those problems just have not been solved.
And when I was doing a little research on it, I read that it collaborates with Swell, Klarna, and Stripe to help small businesses scale without being tied to things like Shopify, by acting as almost a headless checkout option. But can you just walk me through a use case just to help anyone listening understand how it might work in their world?
Yes, it's a little tricky because there are some nuances here, and there are a lot of new concepts in headless or composable commerce, as it's called. So if we think back to when e-commerce started on the web, it was very much a direct analogy to the offline buying experience, right? Think about an e-commerce store. You go to the homepage, that's like the storefront. It's literally called the storefront. The category pages are like your aisles. When you go in front of a product, it's like you're standing in the aisle and you picked up the product, you're looking at the details of it. That's the product page. Then you literally put into a shopping cart. It's still called that. And then you get on the checkout line and you pull out your information, your credit card, and you buy. It is like a direct analogy to what we experience offline. And that made sense back then because it matched expectations. The technology since has developed tremendously. And what's happened on the web is a lot of companies like Shopify have done a great job of allowing merchants to get set up online. So that was like a specific phase of e-commerce over the last few years where it was really advantageous for a company like Shopify to bundle everything together in one stack. You sign up, you can get online, and you can accept payments and so on. What's happening now in e-commerce is more of an unbundling. So merchants are getting more sophisticated. They don't want to be tied into a more rigid structure of that analogy that we talked about, exactly how a store works. Things are different now, right? People view things differently. People live different places online. They don't go shopping in the same way. They don't do Google keywords, right? They're following people that they really like watching their lives unfold online. And then those people are recommending products. The whole product journey and discovery process is very different. So merchants want to break out of that mold of an online store the way it's been thought of over the past 20 years. And that's leading to merchant demand for more flexibility. And so what our product does is it gives the merchant a lot of flexibility over the checkout layer, the transaction layer where the payments actually happen. And we do that in coordination with partners like Stripe and Braintree and PayPal, right? We help merchants accept payments. And then we work with whatever front end, whatever back end the merchant wants. So there are like two main use cases. The first use case is upgrading an existing checkout. If I'm a merchant online and I have a business online, I'm doing, $3 million a year. I've got a good thing going and I'm on, let's say, BigCommerce.
Yeah.
In that use case, that merchant can use our checkout instead of the checkout provided to them by the platform. And we give them, certain benefits, features, advantages, and so on. The other use case, slightly more interesting or forward-facing, is the headless or composable version where a merchant can grab whatever front-end technology makes sense for them, maybe Next.js or Pack Digital or something else, and then they can grab whatever backend they want. Maybe it's Salesforce, maybe it's Commerce Tools, maybe it's Swell, and then they can use our checkout layer so they don't have to build and maintain that very complicated piece of the stack.
Wow, that's incredibly cool. I love how you're covering both sides of the market there. And I also read, I think it was back in 2021, you raised $6 million. So can you tell me about your experience pitching your startup and any advice you'd offer to any startup founder that could be listening anywhere in the world looking to follow in your footsteps? Is there any advice you would pass on there?
Sure. I'm a bit weary of advice because everyone's got their own unique story and version of it. And I had to go through my own learning curve to figure it out. Part of our history as a company was a transition from one company to Rally. Yeah. So the software company that I originally started was called CartHook. And we offered something similar in terms of a third-party checkout, but we did it for Shopify merchants. Mm. And the company grew really quickly and was profitable and doubling every year. It was kind of like a dream scenario. And we didn't have any venture investors there, just some friends and family. And we ran it like a bootstrap company and we got profitable. And that was like one version of the experience. Unfortunately, that company ran into a bit of a wall with Shopify because as we got bigger and started processing like $1 billion a year off of our platform, Shopify wanted that to end and eventually ended it themselves, which happens. And we can kind of talk about that in a different way. Yeah. And so starting Rally, we wanted to leave the Shopify ecosystem, go out to the wider web and offer our types of service around the checkout to everyone else. When we did that, it became clear to me that we should raise venture for that and take a bigger swing and have more backing and have the networking and the political muscle and the money and all that. So I went from never raising venture in all of my businesses to now Rally's the first time I've ever raised venture. We raised a seed round that was $6 million, and that really helped build a team and the product. And we just raised Series A. We haven't announced it yet. We'll kind of make the formal announcement in the next few weeks. We just raised Series A in a very challenging environment, I would say. and now it's a different version of business. Trying to get profitable is what I think of as the default for business, like make more money than you spend. Venture is a different thing. You are necessarily pushing harder than your revenue would allow you to. That's why you raise outside capital. That also increases the pressure and the need for a large exit. So it's just a different form of business. It's not better or worse. I find it more interesting in some ways and not as good in other ways. In terms of advice, you really want to know what you're getting into. That's the biggest piece of advice. I feel like people kind of default to going out and raising money from investors. That's not the only way to do it. Sometimes the media kind of makes it like that's the only way, like, to build a cool startup. It's not true. So more than anything else, you'd have to like know yourself and know what you're getting into and know what you want.
And what about actually growing a business? For any early stage founder listening, wanting to grow a business in this area, in your space here, is there anything you would offer around that? I know it's very subjective, but is there anything you would advise or pass on?
Yeah. Again, I would go back to knowing yourself and what your strengths are. My biggest strength starting off the software company was that I was the customer at first. I was the e-commerce merchant. So I really built for myself. So building for yourself is one like tried and true approach to business and to growing. And then you can use your initial network of other people that used to be your peers that ran as similar businesses and going to them. Whatever you do, you need to stay really close to the market. It's really dangerous to come away from the market and get too many layers between you and customers every day. So I personally take the approach of staying close to the market and then extrapolating out. Okay, based on all of these conversations, there are certain needs right now, but where do I think that's going? Where's the market leaning toward, and what is like the inevitable drift? So that's something that worked for us at CardHook because we saw people were struggling with new marketing tactics around funnels and landing pages and post-purchase offers. They couldn't do that on Shopify. So we built a solution, and because we were in front of a trend, it was really easy to grow because there's so much search and so much talk and so much word of mouth looking for that solution. So now we're doing something similar where we see this unbundling happening and we see merchants want more flexibility. So we build a product that works right now, but really it's almost like built to be positioned out into the future. And then the hope is you build a strong enough business that it can last until the market kind of catches up to where you think it's going. And you also have to be right. And that's, TBD.
Yeah, 100%. And I hear you talk about the flexibility there, and your passion for small businesses and small business owners really shines. So from that side of things, can you expand why it's so important to make sure that small business owners are able to operate on their own terms with that flexibility that you talk about?
Yeah, the passion is a bit accidental, meaning I didn't really mean to get into this version of like, being very passionate about this. But I had it happen to me. I built a fantastic business along with a team of hardworking people. And then a platform came along and decided it didn't want that business to exist anymore. And that will fire you up and that will have an impact on you ideologically. And if you look around at what's happening on the web right now, that's widespread. Entrepreneurs build their businesses on other people's platforms all the time, whether they realize it or not. Sometimes you realize it and it's on purpose and you say, yes, I'm going to build an app for this specific ecosystem. And I understand that there's platform risk involved there. So I've gotten really passionate about that. And when I look at merchants, our customers, I see a bunch of small businesses. For the most part, of course, there's big merchants and they're big companies and great. But what we love working with is like the small and medium. The aspiring great companies, the people who are ambitious and want to grow. And what we see is they get hobbled by a lot of these political issues out on the internet, right? Think about what Apple did to small businesses around advertising in iOS 14, that update.
Yeah.
Like, right, Google built this amazing machine that you can go out and find customers, but it required that person to search. And when they did a search query, they saw ads, and that allowed merchants and other businesses to like capture that demand. Then Facebook comes out and creates an absolute miracle that you can actually go out and find your perfect customer based on all these attributes. So you're not waiting for them to make a search. You can actually say, well, I'm starting a pet food company that is for pets with allergies. And you could just go to Facebook and find that audience. It's like a miracle. And then Apple comes along and says, you know what, Google and Facebook, they're just making too much money, and we got to find our next $1 trillion market cap somewhere. So why don't we just break all of conversion tracking? And then a year or two later, we'll launch our own ad network. And these things are happening at very high levels with the most powerful companies in the world, and entrepreneurs at the floor, at the bottom level, who are striving and clawing and trying to build these businesses just get run over by all these decisions. So that bothers me.
Yeah, I was just going to say, and then ChatGPT comes along. You don't even have to search anymore.
Well, that's almost fun because it is poking all of those very powerful companies and making them scared for the first time in a really long time. When was the last time Google was worried about anything? Yes.
So true. And there's someone right in the heart of this space. You must be watching everything that's going on. And I'm curious, are there any trends in commerce that particularly excite you this year?
Yes, always. Commerce is one of these places on the web that it's dynamic at all times.
Yeah.
And there are always these strange technical limitations that people just find a way to overcome. They are so creative and so ambitious and so incentivized that there's this blend now of media and commerce, where the ability to build an audience, right? We're in a weird time. Yeah. You can have one person with an audience bigger than a massive media company. That just was not possible, and now it's happening everywhere. And what people are starting to realize, you see this with Mr. Beast.
Yeah.
So Mr. Beast, YouTube star, and then you start to realize, oh, their commerce opportunities are directly adjacent to that. Because when you earn the trust of an audience, you can sell them things in your way, and that's starting to play a very large role in commerce online. Where is the audience? Where do we find the potential shopper? And what's happening now in commerce is that transaction is happening closer and closer to where the audience is, right? Don't make me go from TikTok to your product page, to your cart page, to your checkout page, to your thank you page, so then I can finally go back to TikTok, right? People trying to figure out, how do you get that purchase much, much closer to where the person already exists?
That's such a good point.
Yeah, that's a good one. And we see, what we want to see. We want to see more and more effort being put toward composable commerce and merchants being in control of their business more so than the platform being in control of their business. That's the animating theme of our company.
Yeah, and I'm just thinking about what you're saying there. And one person has got more followers, more influence than a whole media company. It's just insane to think about that for a moment. But as for yourselves, what's your big focus this year at Rally? Is that, especially if we've got anyone from your community listening, etc., is there anything you can share about what you're doing at the moment?
Sure. If you think about the history of our company, what we did is we raised money to build a great product. And then once you have a great product, you need to get it out. So the focus for us this year is distribution, partnerships, getting into new markets, building integrations for new platforms, getting our product into the hands of the right merchants. Again, stay close to the customer, get feedback, and then work from there. So the next 12 months is just get the product out there and then listen and then adjust based on what merchants are actually want out of it and how they're actually using it.
Well, I cannot thank you enough for taking the time to sit down and talk with me today and share your insights. I know how busy you are right now, so I want to see if there's something we can do for you now, because some of the biggest names in VC funding and business and tech have either been guests or listened to this podcast. So if there is one person you'd love to have a private breakfast or lunch with, who would it be and why? Because he or she might just listen to this and hopefully we can manifest something together. But who would it be?
I like that question. That's fun, especially in a social context, right? Like have lunch with, talk, not do work with. The person that comes to mind for me is David Chang. Yeah. So he's done something interesting where it is a blend of business and art and creativity and passion and it's still it's a very viable business at the same time. And I always dream about that mixture, because I love what I do for work, and to kind of incorporate more of like these like right brain, like art and cooking and food and interest. That just sounds very, very cool. And I would love to have lunch with him under any circumstances, but to talk business in that way also would be great.
Awesome. Well, I'll send that out into the ether. Let's see what we can manifest together. But before I let you go, for anyone just wanting to find out more information about Rally, contact your team or check out your podcast. I believe you do have a podcast too. So can you advise everyone listening where they can find all that stuff?
Yes, if you're in e-commerce or interested in what we're doing, you want to partner, you want to talk, you can go to rallyon.com, RALLYON.com, and find out more about us, get in touch with us. As for me, I'm on Twitter at Jordan Gall, and I do a weekly podcast with a friend. It's a bit like therapy, where we talk about what we're learning, what's working, what's not working, and that's at bootstrappedweb.com.
Fantastic. Well, I'll add links to all those things there so people can find you nice and easy. Cannot thank you enough for taking the time to sit down with me today. There's so much more we could have talked about, and I'd love to stay in touch with you, maybe get you back on later in the year, see how things are evolving, because this space is moving so fast. But just a big thank you for joining me today.
You're very welcome. Thank you very much for having me on. It was great.
So a huge thank you to Jordan for coming on the podcast today. And if you'd like to join me on the podcast, or you've got a question for me, or you want a few changes to this show, or you'd like to work with me, whatever it is, you can either start off by going to techblogwriter.co.uk, where you'll find 2,300 interviews. Equally, you can send me an email, techblogwriter@outlook.com, or Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram, TikTok, @Neil C. Hughes. I'm the easiest guy in the world to find. And even if you don't choose any of those options, guess what? Yeah, I'm going to be here same time tomorrow with another guest. So thank you for listening as always. And until next time, don't be a stranger.